Hello everyone, I'm Ethan Davis.
I'm Josh Macon.
And I'm John Main.
And for our industry trade report, we're going to talk about concrete. The company that we interviewed was Lithco Contracting LLC. Background about Lithco: annual revenue as provided to us by our interviewee is roughly $705 million per year. That number is slightly different on the internet, however, this one is most accurate as given to us by our interviewee, Mark Stevenson. Mark Stevenson has worked with Lithco for 5 years, and he is a project engineer. The number of full-time employees for Lithco is roughly 450 across the United States. They also have 22 different locations. The sectors that Lithco works in are hospitals, higher education, manufacturing, and multifamily. However, they work in many different sectors as well.
A little bit more on those sectors. We're going to look at their past projects. Lithco actually built the South Deck parking garage here on campus. It was a $400 million renovation project back in 2012 where they poured 20,000 square feet worth of concrete every week. UNCC actually commented that this was the best parking deck that was built on campus, and Lithco had no notable injuries on this project, which speaks a lot to the safety and the values of this company that we'll elaborate more on later. They also built a 12-story office building down in South End, along with the 10-story parking garage to go with it. It was $300 million worth of mixed-use construction back in July of 2019. They also built the first Topgolf in Ohio, in Westchester. They did everything on this project, from foundations to the elevator pit to the site prep, all of that, on the 115,000 square feet that this job took up. They finished 30 days ahead of schedule, and it is the fastest Topgolf to have been built to date. For the typical impact of concrete, it really depends on the job and what you're building. If it's something as small as like a bulky residential job, it might be around 25%. But if it's something massive like a parking garage, then you're looking at almost 90% of that project being concrete. But the impact of concrete on construction is more than just the material composition. Concrete as a structural trade impacts every other trade, from MEP to the glazing at the very, very end, and the architectural masonry on the outside, all of it. And it really does impact construction way more than just, the whole parking garage is concrete.
One of the things that Mark told us about Lithco is that they're flexible when it comes to delivery systems. They're not picky, and as a subcontractor, they aren't technically involved in pre-construction and the design process. However, they like to get involved with the architects and the engineers in order to help reduce mistakes that could happen later on in the project and find cost-effective options instead. And as the subcontractor, once again, they act as influence and guidance rather than physically changing the plans. To get a little info about the schedule information, we're going to talk about our predecessors. Now, concrete is one of the first major steps in the construction process, so there aren't many predecessors that come before it aside from site prep. So this far left image, we have a camera. These images were given to us by Mark at the library that they are currently building in Uptown. And as you can see in this image, you can see all the site prep going on, and they've done all the grading and flattened the surface out. And also in the top left of this image, you can see some silt fences set up. That is part of their erosion control. And this being in the city, they don't have to have as robust erosion control. So on another project, say outside the city limits, might have much more extensive erosion control. This image here is part of the concrete pouring process, and as you can see here, you have two cement trucks that feed into this boom pump truck, which helps pump concrete over the site and makes it far easier for them to maneuver around the site. And instead of having these trucks come in and out all day, you just have this truck that can just pump concrete straight over onto the surface. And a little note here, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see here where they are pouring is the vapor barrier that goes just underneath the concrete. And again, hard to see is the rebar that is vital to concrete construction. Some of the successors after concrete is built. Now, this isn't specific to Lithco's project, however, this being an image from their project, you can see that directly after concrete is poured and hardened, they have wood framing in this case that goes up.
For typical methods of operation for the industry, it is very common to split into crews and pours that are done both simultaneously and staggered in different locations of the site for the sake of efficiency. For foundations, it's split up by zones, whether you're looking at foundations that are in towards the middle of the building underneath columns, or it's foundations underneath the exterior wall. The proper scheduling of this split for different crews is absolutely crucial. There are staggered start times, there's sharing materials, and sharing equipment too. For slabs, they are split more by convenience, whether it's the room that it's in, or there's a wall in the way, or say that boom pump truck can't reach a different room. They're split by convenience mainly, for whether it's like location, like I just said, or priority, whether they're building ground up, so if they want to do the elevator pit, then the ground floor slab, then the first floor, and they're building up. But then also the walls are split, and they're even more split than the foundations or the slabs are, because walls are also split by elevation themselves. The same chunk of wall can be split into multiple pours, where you pour the bottom, let it set, and then pour the next layer. They are also split up by location, as you can see. And for sharing equipment on the walls, that's typically done with a crane to deliver shared material and equipment and say like forms to these different crews in different locations. The crane, you can see pictured right here, reaches most of the site in that circle, but you can also notice there are other crews and different walls that have to be poured and set that are not within this crane's reach. And to share equipment and materials to those crews, they would use other equipment like a skid steer or a boom lift. Being on time is absolutely crucial for the entire job. One crew that is like holding on to forms and being delayed would set all the other crews on the site off, and then since the entire concrete trade is delayed, that sets the entire project delayed as well.
So some of the typical equipment that you can find on a construction site, not just specific to Lithco, but just in general. On the far left, we have a skid steer, as mentioned by Jonathan. And this piece of machinery, most of these pieces of equipment are very important when it comes to maneuverability, because everyone is moving around the site. You need something small, but also very capable to do the work that you need it to do. And the skid steer is one of those examples where it can move material across the site. Down here on the left, we have a ride-on trowel. That is a concrete finishing machines. Typically those are used in more industrial and larger sized projects, as Mark said to us that usually Lithco uses them if their slab is around 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. If it's smaller than that, they can use walk-behinds and hand finishers. Then we also have here our boom lift, which is primarily used for vertical transfer of material. And then we have a mini excavator. Now this one is very important to Lithco because they rent all of these pieces of equipment from Sunbelt Rentals, and this piece of equipment is very important because they use the mini excavator, again, because of maneuverability, but also they get the largest size possible for its capability. And one little feature that's most important about the mini excavator is the size of the bucket. They like to associate that with the size of the holes that they dig for the foundations, as it mitigates the amount of concrete waste when they pour. To continue about the equipment, this is the larger pieces of equipment as we saw in the photos previously. You have your cement mixer truck and you have your boom pump lift truck. And then for materials, this is more of the smaller scale stuff. We have a sled tamp, which is pretty much a lawnmower for dirt. And it's typically owned rather than rented. It's just more cost effective. And we, as you can see on this image as well, you have a small warehouse forklift, which is used, again, maneuverability. When the crane can't get around the site, you have something that can move around very quickly. And again, smaller finishing machines, whether it's a walk behind or just hand finishing for smaller projects.
So as mentioned before, when it comes to the cost of the equipment and other things like the materials, Lithco will go through Sunbelt Rentals to get the prices of their equipment. The two pictures to my left On the top, we have that Mini X that was talked about earlier, and then we also have a forklift that was in one of the pictures earlier as well. And those pictures highlighted in the red boxes from left to right, it tells you the price on how much it would cost to rent per day, per week, and then per month. Something that's really nice though about Sunbelt will be if you're approaching 4 out of 5 days of the week for a rent, they will automatically bump you up to the 1 week rental rate instead to help save you some money just by a few $100, which is always nice. Some of the other costs that they will encounter would be taxes with everything, the delivery of the equipment along with the fuel usage that they have for all the equipment per day. Unfortunately, when we talked to Mark, we weren't able to get an exact example of what some of their rates are for their jobs, but we were able to get some examples online through research through Sunbelt. And then on the picture here at the bottom, the big one is an example of what a concrete slab would be for the materials. In the unit cost section, we have how much it would cost per square footage, how much it would cost per labor per square foot, and then adding on that all together would get you your total cost. So one example that we were actually able to get from Mark was about 2 jobs, about the percentages breakdown of what prices of the total contract goes to what. Out of the 2 jobs, we took the average of all of them, and the biggest ones that we took away was 20% was for labor, 45% was for materials, and then equipment was only 5%. When it comes to safety and codes, one thing that Lithco likes to do is put the building codes into the contract so it's clear and everyone has a good understanding and it's all there written down. One thing that they have a challenge with when it comes to codes is the ADA compliance. It's very much so push and pull with ADA compliance. Typically when like an ADA ramp would be designed, the elevation of it is at the absolute max. So it leaves very little room for any possible errors or mishaps or wiggle room just to change it at all. And it's important to keep those aligned with the plans, because if those aren't exactly with the plans, when the county inspection comes, you can fail those inspections. Another big thing that they do is with the rebar, especially with the PTI guidelines. That is a big one that I follow as well. When it comes to the safety equipment, obviously they go with OSHA guidelines, but Lithco being as caring as they are about their crew and their safety, they go above and beyond when it comes to these safety measures. A couple of the examples are these 3M Virtua CCS safety glasses up in the top right. They have these foam liner around them. The reason why they go above and beyond for OSHA with those is when they're doing their concrete work or really any work in general, there's always a lot of dust and particles in the air. The foam liner keeps everything from going underneath the eyelids or the eye covers of the glasses, again, in your eyes. A couple other examples where they go above and beyond compared to OSHA is anything that's over, any leading edge that's over 6 feet tall, they are 100% tied off. And they have also switched over to the cast hard hats, which have better foam for more comfort, and they also have chin straps, which we also have pictured over here. One thing that they also do on every job is they document and learn from the experience of the safety, whether incidents happen or not, what their crew thinks of the equipment and whatnot. And overall, from what Mark said, to quote him, it's the right thing to do, especially when it comes to the crew's safety, going above and beyond.
So when it comes to quality assurance, there are 2 simple steps that Mark gave us that kind of gave us an idea of what a submittal would look like for an owner. For the first step, it would be determine an area of focus. For this case, it'll be the walls. In that case, it would be finish levels, architectural versus structural, and then vertical and horizontal QA and QC. Then we have the actual submittal, which is pictured up here on the left. Submittal includes pictures to double check design team, make sure that there aren't any mistakes, any discrepancies, and we'll get back to that last point in a second. If you can look here at the bottom right corner, we have an image of one of the walls that was used in a submittal. In this case, it was a Wells Fargo parking deck. As you can see here, you can see how the different batches were poured into the wall itself, and if you can see it on screen, you can see there's like this discoloration between batches, which is fine. It just shows that their process and how they poured the concrete in. And at the very end, if there are any blemishes or small little holes, they have a guy that they call the rub patch guy who comes in and is basically an artisan. He comes in and cleans up, patches some holes, and makes it look nice and pretty. To continue on, for quality control, now they do strength testing, which includes non-destructive, sonar and rebound hammer, and then destructive, which is test cylinders, which is what he is pouring in here. Now, to get to Lithco specifically, that is an industry standard, but Lithco specifically, because they do not supply their own contract, they use vendors, and if a vendor's break report is low, the vendor will then go with Lithco to the site and do non-destructive testing on site for the engineer of record. If the engineer of record rejects that test, as in it's too low, it's not strong enough, they can take out a core from already placed concrete on site and do some destructive tests to decide on whether or not the concrete batch is good or bad.
So when it comes to project coordination, in general, on any site, it can't be underestimated how important it really is. Specifically with Lithco and just concrete construction in general, concrete touches every trade, every aspect, just simply covers the whole basis of whatever project or job is going on. It has impacts on the underground MEPs, it has impacts with the waterproofing, the structural steel, and one thing that Lithco specifically will do on their job site is they will act as a mini GC, which I believe was mentioned before. And essentially what they will do is they will work with all the other trades, whether it's mechanical, electrical, plumbing, everything, to make sure everyone's on the same page, that the mechanical team has a place to put it in the concrete and everything is poured correctly and casted correctly. Some of the challenges that come with the coordination is working with your partners. Like I just mentioned, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, really anybody that you could work with on the job site. Having that communication and making sure everyone is on the same page of what needs to be done is very, very important. In Mark's experience, he told us that the design team is typically under a lot of pressure trying to push out drawings and get them completed, and sometimes when that happens, errors do occur. But usually, as long as the communication is good with everybody on the team, those can be easily resolved. And the picture on the left is something you will see in the CPA class. It essentially represents how, if there is poor communication with all these partners in different trades, how different a simple swing can be perceived depending on the trade. So some of the changes to the industry that Mark told us about was, one of the biggest one really was the implementation of Revit. Even though Revit has a lot of benefits to it, it helps visually see everything that's going on the job site through the computer screen. If you don't have someone on the job site who fully understands what is happening and fully comprehends how things are supposed to go, it will just blow up in your face and it will just be a massive mess. So having that is very important. And then another thing that he mentioned as well, that we kind of listed, was things are adapting as the industry changes, are the safety standards, which are always constantly changing, new tools, 3D printing of concrete, 3D printing in general, better forming strategies, stronger framing, and then also just the industry as a whole can sometimes get slow upgrades. When it comes to the lessons learned from this project, the biggest thing we took was the communication. That was the biggest element. The communication between the project manager, your superintendent, and your field lead is extremely important for any project in the industry. If you don't have it, your project will sadly fail. When it comes back to this one here in a second. Another thing that he told us was also just having respect for all and everybody that you work with, from whether they're on your job site just for a day, for a few minutes, or you're going to be working with them the entire time, or even if for your client. He gave us a couple of examples and stories to represent that. He, at one of their job sites at their parking lot, they had a gate guard to help mitigate traffic and get people in and out. And instead of just driving in, showing the ID, and moving on about your business, he would take time and actually talk to the guy, treat him with respect and be nice, and make sure he knows he is just as important to the job as if compared to anybody else. And he also really drove how important it is to treat your clients, because at the end of the day, you're always selling the service of your company to them, and not only to them but to your crew. You want your crew to be happy working with you, not being all mad and upset working for you.
If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But other than that, thank you for watching.